Today we are looking at the application of the Good Shepherd position paper on migration into our programs and projects. We want to thank Winifred for being with us on the 30th of April and really sharing, she did a very good sharing on the actual position paper itself, migration. So today I will attempt to link and deepen the application of the position paper onto our programs. And hopefully by the end of the session, each one of us who are gathered here will be encouraged to review and deepen our existing programs, and perhaps, if it's possible, to start new programs addressing migration. At the end of this short input, we will go into group discussions and there will be questions that will be posed for us to reflect. There is one page in the position paper which I really like. And this is on the last page, is the mission development process. And its title is A Diagram for Implementation of the Our Lady of Charity of the Good Shepherd position papers. So today, as we are gathered here, what we are actually doing today would be on specialized training. We will be talking about advocacy. We're actually doing organizational capacity building. And because we are a mixture of sisters and lay mission partners, we're also building mission partnership here. And we're looking at also the spiritual aspects of our work and the congregation. So this, for me, is a really very good diagram and image of integrating justice and peace, spirituality, and good ministry practices. So what are the principles of today's sharing? The first principle that I want to highlight to everyone is that each one of you, are the experts on the ground. And this session is nothing more than as a guide to mission effectiveness. And at the end of the day, it is each one of you who will go back to your ministries and who will make the mission better. So underlying principle is you are the experts. Second is, I hope during this session that we will be able to see the integration of spirituality and justice and peace with good ministry practices in the conversations that we will have in the presentation that will be happening today. And the entire presentation will be based on the human rights-based approach. And at the same time, we have heard many people say, what is the human rights-based approach? Is it something that is foreign to Good Shepherd? Is it something that is against, that will lead us in our ministries to encounter some difficulty with our government? What is it actually? So hopefully today we will be able to see that whatever we've been doing, whether it's charity-based or needs-based or rights-based, it is just actually an amalgamation of all different approaches. And if we have been doing charity on needs, the human rights-based approach just encourages us to go one step deeper, encourages to enlarge and to widen our ministry and our programs. So I hope all that will come true to each one of you as you participate in this session. Next, as I was searching and researching to do this session, I wanted to just have an image of what it would look like. So I found this picture, and this is an artist who's just 13 years old. Her name is Claudia, and she's from Indonesia. Claudia participated in the UN Art for Peace, and this is her painting. And at the same time, I'd like to bring St. Mary Euphrasia and her sayings into our session. One of her sayings is, love all persons, whatever their background, their nationality, their race. Devote yourselves to their happiness. I'm sure for many of us who are in mission, this has been our motto and this has been our guiding principle, especially when the going gets tough. And I'd like also to bring Micah 6:8 into this sharing. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. And I've just included a link here on Bible quotes on welcoming strangers. When I was looking for Bible quotes on this, I was very, very pleasantly surprised at the number of Bible quotes there are on how to welcome strangers and how it is imperative that we do welcome strangers into our homes and into our society. So we talk about migration, and I'd like to just bring in the position paper each time when we talk about a certain reference. So migration is the movement of people across borders from country of birth to another country, either on a temporary basis or on a permanent basis. So who are we talking about from the position paper, item number 3? Who are migrants? Who are people moving across borders? They are migrants, internally displaced persons, temporary workers, refugees, stateless persons, asylum seekers. And each category is defined under a separate legal framework in national and international law. And all these people are entitled to move in safety and dignity. That is their human right. So I'm also very aware as I speak now that in Asia Pacific, 1 or 2 countries consider people who move within interstate in the particular country as migrants. One of the countries is India and the other is Vietnam. We need to appreciate that in the international scene, the term migrants actually belong to people who move across borders. So when I'm talking to India or I'm talking to Vietnam, when we are doing our projects, I am cognizant also that because of the situation of your country and the size of the country, you also consider internal movement of people as migrants. I'd like to bring you into this Asia Pacific, where we are in Asia Pacific. If we look at all these countries, they are sending countries. Okay, and you can identify where you are in your respective countries. And we look at these are destination countries. Okay, these are countries who are recipients of sending countries. What interests me a lot about this diagram is, if we look at Asia Pacific and where Good Shepherd is present, we are present in both sending countries as well as destination countries. Next, I'd like to bring into the picture the Human Development Index. What does the Human Development Index, what does it comprise of? It comprises of let me look at my notes. It comprises of the life expectancy of the population in each country, the expected years of schooling, which would then relate to Sustainable Development Goal 4.3. It talks about how many years of schooling the average citizen has, which relates to Sustainable Development Goal 4.6, and also the gross national income per capita. So it's Sustainable Development Goal 8.5. So when we look at life expectancy at birth, it relates to Sustainable Development Goal 3. So the Human Development Index is a better index to use to rank our countries according to the Human Development Index. Yeah. So if we look at this and the Human Development Index of all our countries in Asia Pacific, you will see that the destination countries have a higher Human Development Index than the sending countries. Okay. And when we look at this, we already know the push and the pull factors, why people move from a sending country to a destination country. And I think this current situation that we're having with regards to COVID-19 has surfaced the dependency of the destination countries on migrants to help the economy, to work. Migrants work in almost all sectors of the economy in the destination countries. And this COVID-19 pandemic, which doesn't discriminate between citizens, migrants, or refugees, has also surfaced how migrants are living in the destination countries, whether they have access to healthcare, what their living conditions are like, what their working environment is like, whether they actually have, whether they have access to even testing of COVID-19. Okay, so this is a very good picture of where we are in Asia Pacific. So when we look at this other diagram, it shows the net migration flows, the outflows, and the inflows. Next, I would like to touch on the basic principles of human rights approach. First is universality. Second, non-discrimination and equality. Third will be participation and inclusion. Next would be transparency. And after that, accountability. Now, Winifred in her last session has spoken on all this, so I will not go into it. But I would just like us, as we talk about the rights-based approach in all our programming, to take note of non-discrimination, participation and inclusion. How do we include our program participants in the programs and in the decisions that are being made concerning them? And we talk about transparency and accountability. What are the rights and responsibilities in a sustainable capacity development model? As Good Shepherd, we must always talk about sustainable capacity development in all our programs. All our programs should have the theory of change. When a program participant comes to us at the time of crisis or at the time of need, by the time they go through our programs and they are able to exit from our programs, they must be able to have options, and they must be able to make decisions for themselves. And that is what we mean by the theory of change when we when the program participants encounter Good Shepherd. So what is the sustainable capacity development model like? If we have at the one end of the spectrum, at the top here, we have the institutional responsibility, which is the state. And the state is also known as the duty bearer. So the state here relates to our countries. At the bottom, we have human rights, individual and collective rights, which are the rights holders. So you and I, we are rights holders. It gets a little bit tricky when you have someone, assuming someone who is the judge, someone who is the police, someone who works for the state, or a minister. When that person is in that role, that person is a duty bearer. But at the same time, that person is also the citizen of a country. So that person is also has rights and is a rights holder. So when we look at this right side of the diagram, the institutional responsibility, that means of the state to the rights holder, is to meet the rights holder's obligations, meets its obligations. And from the rights holders, individual and collective, to the state, that means to our individual countries, is to claim our rights, okay? So when we look at the rights-based approach, we are talking about the accountability process between our countries and us as rights holders. And we are looking at the other process, which is the process of empowerment from the rights holders to be able to claim their rights from the state. Okay, so when we are looking at our programs and we are looking at what does it mean by a rights-based approach, that means there are two processes here, the accountability process and the empowerment process. And we will look at it today and say, where do these two processes come in? We are very familiar with this diagram, which is the whole continuum of care of a particular society. Winifred spoke about whole person and whole society approach, whole society and whole government approach in her session on the 30th of April. So when we look at this diagram, we have here the program participant who rests within a family system, who is within a community system and the society at large. And the society at large is within the country and within the larger international framework. So whilst doing this, I have put all the different shades of green to represent the rights holders and the different shades of brown to represent the duty bearers. So what does this mean? Individual human beings are rights holders whose rights are codified in UN international covenants and conventions. All rights have corresponding duty bearers who are responsible in fulfilling the corresponding rights in a given context. So what do our programs address? What must our programs address? Our programs address the capacity gaps between the rights holders and the duty bearers. It is because of these gaps that exist that the rights holders are not experiencing their basic human rights. And because the duty bearers are not fulfilling and are not accountable for their rights, there are gaps there are capacity gaps that we must address. So as we look at our programs today, we will look at where the gaps are. I want to bring you to this diagram on the rights holders. So when we look at the human rights-based approach, for rights holders, the whole process is empowerment. It's empowerment, nothing more than empowerment, so that rights holders can claim their rights. Okay. Now, in the process of empowerment, we start with the program participant. Normally, we talk about the restoration of dignity, self-worth, confidence, and we equip our program participants with skills, with knowledge, etc., etc. Then we move on to the knowledge of rights and how to access rights. We teach them what are the available processes of it in the country, what are the laws that are available, what are the policies that are available, what are the benefits that are available in the country. Next, we look at educating the community and society at large on individual and collective rights. We form support groups, coalitions, advocate for systemic changes, so that at the end, ultimately, the individual rights holder is able to claim their rights. Now, in all our programs, we have shifted from the charity and the needs-based, where there is a position of power, where I have and you don't have, so I am equipping you. But we are saying in today's context, in today's congregational direction statement, we are looking at a rights-based approach, means the program participant and Good Shepherd, we are walking together. Neither has more power over the other, but we are looking at how do we bring out the power within the rights holders themselves? How do we share power? How do we empower the rights holders so that they no longer need a Good Shepherd program, but they on their own can claim their rights and have opportunities for better life? And we're looking at the country and the international scenario. So what do we mean by the accountability of duty bearers? Each of our country, all our countries have got constitutions, which are the supreme law of the land. We've got laws that bring justice to society. We've got policies that are framed for achieving certain goals within society. We've got social protection mechanisms, etc., etc., etc. All these are within the country. And on the international standards, we have the UN Human Rights Conventions, in particular, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the CRC. And if we are looking at migrants and migration per se, we have the International Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers and their Families. And we have the Refugee Convention. We have the Global Compact on Migration, the TIP Protocol, the Sustainable Development Goals, etc. All these are documents and conventions at the international level. So these bring accountability by the duty bearers to the rights holders. I want to start by looking at destination countries, and these are the destination countries. At destination countries, we need to ask ourselves these questions. What are the pull factors? Why are migrants and refugees coming to these countries, coming to our countries? What are the laws and policies in place to protect the human rights of migrants and refugees? How do we treat migrants and refugees in destination countries? How do we welcome these people who are not our citizens into our country? And in today, as I shared earlier in the other PowerPoint, in other slide, that all these countries that we are looking at now, we have a very high dependency on migrant workers to do the 3D jobs, the dirty, the demeaning, and the dangerous jobs that our locals do not do anymore. Good Shepherd programs in destination countries. Here, I'm just going to share some of the programs that we do. It is not exhaustive. In some of your countries, you do more than what is listed here. So if we look at the program participant, we have shelter programs. We do trauma management. It could be counseling. It could be different things that we do. We do capacity development in skills training. We have learning centers. We have human rights, safe migration. Some of us have service centers, drop-in centers for migrants in our destination countries. Like in Korea, we are doing a hotline for migrants. Okay, so these are related to program participants. So when we look at these programs related to program participants, it is an all-encompassing approach. We have the charity approach. When a person comes, we provide basic protection first. Then we have the needs-based approach, because we talk about after addressing your initial trauma, what are your needs now? So in the rights-based approach, we bring it to one level higher and we say, now that we've addressed your immediate protection needs, we are looking at your options for the future. How do we empower you to claim your rights? If we look at the family in our destination countries, normally the migrants are not able to bring their families with them. They come alone. So as a destination country, we may be doing family contact, family reintegration, we may be doing family strengthening. In the communities, we may be doing education of the community and the public to reject xenophobia. We may be talking about fair wages, fair working conditions. We may be creating safe spaces for refugees as we welcome them into our countries. Multi-stakeholder partnerships. Some of us are engaging businesses already to look at labor demands, to look at fair working conditions. How do we engage businesses to ensure that that all the workers that they have on their workforce have documents? We are already networking for effective advocacy. We are trying ways and means to include migrants and refugees in mainstream society. So these are some of the programs that we do in our country. There could be more. As I'm sharing this with you, I also encourage you to look and to open up your minds and to say, what else can we do? What are the other options that we can do? How do we connect with another destination country and ask, what are the programs that you do? Next, we look at, in destination countries, what are the things that we are doing to address accountability of the duty bearers to migrants and refugees in our country? Some places have already started research and advocacy desks or offices or departments. And we ask ourselves, are laws, policies, and programming of our countries based on human rights principles? Are they implemented? Are they being reviewed periodically? What are the UN conventions that our country has ratified and are obligated to implement? If not, how do we seek ratification? How do we encourage our countries to sign up for the UN convention so that at least there could be some check and balance? Some have already started to participate and to prepare alternative reports to UN bodies. And we hold our duty bearers accountable for protecting the rights of migrants and refugees. Another very, very effective tool for working with governments is actually to engage governments. How do we build trust and relationship? Winifred spoke about personal influence in her session. How do we use our personal influence to develop trust and relationship with people who are working in government departments, people who have influence, are in places of influence in our countries? How do we build capacity of duty bearers? There are funding agencies that will fund projects that will work with duty bearers, that will work with the police, with the judiciary, with shelter wardens, with people who work in the immigration, people who work in the police force. There are donor agencies who will fund NGOs who will work in capacity developing duty bearers. How do we do joint projects? How do we do joint campaigns, government and Good Shepherd? How do we together work for long-term solutions? Okay, these are holding our duty bearers accountable to the rights holders in destination countries. So the question that we ask ourselves as Good Shepherd, are we doing enough? Are we moving out from our comfort zones? Are we being audacious? How are we practicing zeal? Good food for thought, yeah? Next, I want to move to sending countries. So those of us who are in sending countries, what are the push factors? Why are citizens leaving the country? Is it because of poverty? No jobs available? Why are citizens forced to flee the country and become refugees? First, they become persons of concern. Then they become asylum seekers and they move on to refugee status. Is it of violence? Is it because of persecution? Do the governments in our countries do enough to protect the citizens abroad? Do our countries have policies that will enable our citizens, your citizens abroad working in different countries, to have to address their legal rights? Do our governments do enough to prevent people from leaving the country in search of better job opportunities? These are questions we ask ourselves. And another question as Good Shepherd, we must always ask, who do these people leave behind? And that's where the International Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers and their families come in. How do we assist? How do we address the migrant families who are left behind in the country of origin? Next, we talk about Good Shepherd programs, yeah? In sending countries. Normally in sending countries, we look at the education of individuals and communities. We talk about safe legal migration, migration labor rights, and fair practices. We talk about safety and protection mechanisms. We have skills training so that when a person migrates, they are better able to have better jobs. We talk about creating support systems. Many of us are part of NGOs, part of a coalition of NGOs, which are able to provide migrant workers who are leaving their countries of origin with a list of phone numbers in the country of destination. So these are some of the things that we do. We have also started to look at livelihood opportunities in the country of origin. We are looking at to say, how do we support people so that they don't leave their families behind? So that children are not left behind with extended family members. We have started to do economic justice projects. We are looking at self-help groups. We are looking at social enterprise and many other initiatives that have started. We are also engaging multiple stakeholders. we are trying to see how can we work with businesses to promote local employment. How can we network with a coalition of NGOs to promote better sustainable social protection systems within the countries of origin. We're looking at joint projects with destination countries. These are some of the things that Good Shepherd is already doing in sending countries. How do we address accountability by duty bearers in sending countries? It is basically the same principles. In your sending countries, do research and advocacy as well. Ask yourself, what are the laws, policies, and programs available? How do we hold duty bearers accountable to protect its citizens abroad? How do we hold duty bearers accountable to providing employment in the country of origin? And how do we work towards long-term sustainable solutions for the program participants and for the citizens of our individual countries? Okay. Same question we ask, are we doing enough? Are we doing enough in our sending countries? Are we opening ourselves up to more options, more possibilities, to new ways of working that we do not know how to, but we are afraid to venture, but we know that we can no longer do the same programs that we have been doing year after year, because we are not seeing changes in our program participants. We are not seeing changes in the systemic change in the laws and the advocacy of our countries. It's the same. So the question we ask ourselves as Good Shepherd is, are we doing enough? I want to bring you to this other diagram, Good Shepherd mission, programs, projects, and advocacy. We must be very aware that you and I and the hundreds of other mission partners in Asia Pacific, it could be even thousands, sisters and lay mission partners who are working in mission, we are the change makers. Don't look outside the system. Don't look at another person to change the system for us. We are the change makers. And the Good Shepherd organization that we work in is the change vehicle. As a change maker, if we don't have a change vehicle to work within, to have the synergy and the exponential reach, then we will not be as effective. So I bring you back to Good Shepherd position paper, item number 6. 6B talks about strengthening knowledge, analysis of migration, know your laws, your UN conventions, your documents, know the 1951 Refugee Convention. In the change vehicle, this same section in the position paper encourages us at 6A to develop rights-based practices, cross-border projects, educate people on their rights, ensure gender analysis in service planning, work on long-term solutions, advocate nationally and internationally. The question we ask ourselves as change makers, as mission partners, what are my own gaps in these areas? Do I know 6B? Do I know 6H? And the question we ask ourselves in the organization as a change vehicle, what are the gaps in our programs and in our units? Have we started developing the rights-based approach, or are we still in the needs-based approach? Have we started educating people? Do we do gender analysis in our service planning? Do we work on long-term solutions? Have we started doing advocacy? Good food for thought, yeah? We go back to this diagram and we ask ourselves, how do we bring the concerns of the program participants right up to the international level where Winifred is? How do we feed upwards from the program level to the UN level? How do we do that? It's nothing more than documentation, 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 documentation. How do we have systems in place that document the change processes of our program participants? Who are the rights holders? How do we document the gaps in our country's existing laws, in our country's existing capacity gaps, in being accountable to the rights holders? How do we document the encounter that our program participant has with a specific police officer who, instead of helping her, has asked her to go home? Instead of helping the migrant access their rights, migrants are put in detention centers. How do we document all these? And how do we map it against the laws of the country, against our intervention approaches, so that we can escalate this information up to Winifred, up to the Good Shepherd International Justice and Peace Office? Without documentation, all the work that we do is not evidence-based. And when there's no evidence, it lacks credibility. And that's why you will find many NGOs that do lobbying, only advocacy, they will always inevitably want to network with an NGO that does grassroots services. Because without documentation, documenting the change processes, we are not able to bring our voice to the country level for systemic advocacy within our country, and we will not have the sufficient evidence to bring it to the international level. So I cannot stress enough about documentation. The good thing about Good Shepherd is today we are looking at better ways of working. We are looking at monitoring and evaluation. And with monitoring and evaluation, we are looking at indicators of change. And with indicators of change, we are saying, how are we spending donor funds? And with the donor funds, which requires documentation, bit by bit, we are seeing this in place in our programs. And I want to congratulate you for doing it, because it is not an easy process. So we come back to this diagram of where we are in Asia Pacific. And I'm not sure if there is any other NGO or civil society organization that has got presence in sending countries, in receiving countries, that have got presence in country that has got the Human Development Index of 4, right up to a country with a Human Development Index of 152. The question we ask ourselves is, are we now ready for a cross-border projects? Are we ready to come together as Good Shepherd and say, to address the issue of migration, we need to look at ourselves, and we need to be able to say, how do we collaborate and work across borders to be more effective in our mission? The next question is, are our programs cutting across all the different layers? Where are the gaps and the blocks if it's not? What do we need to focus our attention on so that we can be more effective? These are the 3 questions that I want to leave you with, that we will now go into our breakout rooms. In our breakout rooms, we will try to have, I will look at how many participants are with us today, and we'll try to have not more than 4 to 5 people in the breakout rooms. And we will have 15 minutes of conversation. That is quite a good amount of time to just be sharing. You will find that in your breakout rooms, you may have people from sending countries and people from destination countries. Before we go into our breakout rooms, I'd just like you to take out your piece of paper, your pen, and we will just spend 1 minute of reflection on these questions. Remember, individually, we are the change makers. And if we don't shift our consciousness as individuals, the organization will not be able to change, will not be able to shift. So let's spend 1 minute, look at these questions, and jot down your own reflections. Yes, so I'm now reading the chat messages that were sent to me earlier, which, as I was sharing, I could not see the messages. So questions like, can I say more how we read and understand the HDI or Human Development Index? I would suggest this question came from Salome. Just Google the UN Human Development Index, and it will have the entire explanation there. Okay, it's a very useful document, and it will have the variables as to how they were calculated. Suggestion for a Q&A in between the session. I'm sorry, I just couldn't stop because we are limited in timing. If we stop for a Q&A, we will only finish at 12. So I had proposed that the Q&A be at the end. So thank you for all these messages that have come in. Yeah. So can we hear from the different breakout groups? Or even if it's not from the breakout groups, if anyone has an insight or reflection to share with the bigger group.
Okay, may I share our group?
Yes.
Okay. Our group, the first question to our program intention on migrants is cut through all layers. Most of us.
Mary-Jean, hold on first. Let me mute the rest so that we can hear you better. And you please unmute yourself, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
So we share about the, yes, there is the gaps and blocks because of the lack of network, lack of capacity and knowledge. And about these all the documents is so important, but as a global level and international level, we are very much focused on our own area and programs. But sometimes we forgot to write the documents because of the language barriers, because of the lack of knowledge. This is our sharing. And also what we need to focus on our attention is more develop the network and then capacity building and knowledge of these older migrants. And we share this is a very good start using this webinar to in order to know the different realities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie-Jean. Thank you. Would anyone like to add on or have a different viewpoint? Yes, Salome, Joan, do you want to share?
Yes. Yeah. From my group, we were talking about, do our programs intervention, cut through those layers. We felt that they're still very much lacking because first, I think it begins from each one of us as to how do we, what is our perception about these migrants who come to our, place? Do we just see them or do we feel, hey, they are one of us, let's welcome them? Even those within our own organizations who are working out, do we even know what they are going through or their families? So it's basically, it starts from me, how the changes has to start from within, so that's one. Also, there was this sharing about from Taiwan where they shared about migration, marriage migration. I mean, those who come to Taiwan, because of marriage and how their foundation is reaching out. So the emphasis they were talking about focusing on the individuals so far, And the second part is about capacity. There's the gaps. There's the need for capacity building and more stronger coordination and networking, to focus on that. And as Taiwan also has shared, maybe Peggy can later add on, something to focus on policy and also that how to get more funding to help, and the focus should be whether they are trying to it's an issue they had to decide on in their own country, whether they should focus on marriage migrants or migrant workers. So that was one of the things. So yeah, the third question, in order to be more effective, is of course to be more effective in advocacy, and that will involve capacity building as well.
Yes.
I don't know.
Thank you very much, Salome, for
Yeah.
your reaction, and thank you to Marie Jean as well. I just want to add on from the reactions that we have heard about the change coming from within. We have shared just now that it's important as change makers that we ourselves must shift in our consciousness. And the first shift that we must be able to make is, how do we view migrants in our own countries? And how do we view, this would be for destination countries, yeah? And for sending countries, it would be, how do we prepare people to leave so that migration is safe for them? It is the human right of everyone to travel across borders. We cannot stop the movement of people as they move in search of better living for themselves and their families. But what do we do to help them move safely? And how do we come up from programs that we are so familiar with, that keeps us within our own walls, that doesn't take us out to where the realities are? And so in a rights-based approach, we cannot stay behind. We really need to know, because there's no way we can do the rights-based approach if we don't know the realities of the other person that we are assisting. Because in a rights-based approach, you need to be able to encourage the power within the person to surface. And you can't do that by being clinical and by being distant. You have to enter the shoes of the person. And that's why we say, when we do a rights-based approach, the shift has to happen from the individual into the organization,
Yes.
into all our processes and our programs. Then only can we say we are truly a rights-based organization. Next reaction, please. Thank you so much for your views. As you share, then I can expand on it.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Someone else, please.
Lisa, from breakout room 10.
Yes.
I think Josephina have shared very insightful.
Okay.
I think it'd be nice to have her to share it with everyone here.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
So, Josephina, we are waiting for you to share.
I promised Larissa I will keep quiet. That's why I only spoke in I think Veronica can say it for me.
Just for your information, Joe is a friend of mine who participated in the session for the temporary professor in ONJ in 2018. Yes. So I invited her to be part of this sharing. Anyone else?
What happened to Joe? Joe's insightful sharing. Quick, you got 1 minute, Joe.
Come before, just share.
I was telling the group it's a very, very complex matter. The push and pull factors are mostly economic, but not just economic. There are cultural factors. There are some other factors, including social circles in terms of migration. But it would really be very good for the Good Shepherd sisters to sort of adopt the approach of the environmentalists. Like, for example, in terms of tagging, take a look at what are the endangered sections of migrants. And these are where you are going to tag them, like they are at risk. And you're doing it now. It's just that I was telling the group, when we begin to apply this in terms of thousands, like for example, Philippines, from the Philippines to Malaysia, how do you tag, at-risk groups when we are dealing with about 500,000 migrants crossing the borders from Philippines to Malaysia. The gravity of the problem is really, really bad. But if the Good Shepherd Philippines would identify, tag the ones that they really encounter in the Philippines before leaving the Philippines, and communicate it to the Good Shepherd sisters in Malaysia, the same way that the environmentalists are tagging, for example, the whales, trying to see where the whales are going, and alerting the nations to protect them wherever they're going. That's probably a good approach in terms of addressing a small part of the complexity of the problem. But as human beings, we are hopeful that even if it takes 1,000,000 years, we probably will be able to solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. By the way, Joe is an anthropologist by profession. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Risa, of course, I think we need to have alternative supportive mechanism. Like when we talk about safe migration, because even in Sri Lanka, we have a lot of people migrate with having so many risks. But we know that most of us are women go for as domestic workers. But still within the country, we have many opportunities for the domestic workers. So we are wondering how we can have that link. I remember once also we had that, we worked with one NGO to have these domestic workers, to train them and to provide them job opportunities here in Sri Lanka itself. So we were thinking whether we can have kind of programs, including this microfinance and all that. So, and again, it's in Sri Lanka, we are not much organized in this level as the other countries also. So I think we have to focus more on this. Concerning this is the issue. We have not considered and we have not felt it. So this would be a very important session for us to to start anew and to link everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shamindani. I am reminded that as Good Shepherd, we need to ask ourselves, how do we do the needs analysis? Because when we look at the whole person, whole system, whole government approach, are we looking at the lens of just Good Shepherd? Because in a rights-based approach, we must include the program participant in the decision-making. So you may be conceptualizing a program that does not fit the need of the program participants because we are looking at it from our lens. So how do we include program participants in formulating the programs? And as Josefina just shared about the tagging, how do we track people on a short-term basis, on a medium-term basis, on a longitudinal basis, so that the research and advocacy is strengthened? So I encourage each one of us here to go back to our programs and say, what is project cycle management all about? How do we do the needs analysis on the ground? Go back to the diagram in the last page of the position paper, and you will see in the last page of the position paper, it has got all the different components as to what programming is about. Yeah, so whilst we are conceptualizing new programs, because that's the purpose of these sessions, and we are deepening our existing programs and reviewing them to ask what kind of change are we bringing to the program participant, to the families of the program participant, to the community, the society at large, by holding duty bearers accountable to rights holders. It may seem a very academic thing at this point, but when you actually get to understand the needs of the program participants, you will find the multi-level interventions that are needed. And then we will start to open up and say, at the end of the day, the government needs to participate in the change that we are doing. Without government intervention, very little changes in the lives of other people who may be experiencing the same crisis. So thank you for raising the need about looking at domestic workers internally within Sri Lanka. Have conversations with people who are in domestic work. Understand the situation before doing a program. And you will find that if your planning is good at the beginning, you will see the change happening. Okay, someone else.
Yeah, I just know some new ideas I'm getting after listening.
Yes, Peter.
One thing is we should also change our perception towards these people who are going abroad as migrants. The moment we think that they are working abroad means they are becoming rich and well-to-do. So looking at their family and the people who are left behind whole totally changes. I think there we have to make a perception check also. There may be many migrants who are working in a very difficult condition and with the minimum, the income, and there is also pressure on them, the whole society expecting them to improve their family and where they have, tremendous pressure. So we have to understand their situation where they are working as well as the family situation, which they are the people who are left behind by these migrants.
Thank you, Peter. And that comes to our next point as Good Shepherd, because we are both in sending countries where the expectation of the person who has gone abroad is very, very high to supply financial, to see to the financial requirements of the people left behind, which is sometimes not just the family, including the extended family members, including the whole village sometimes.
Yes.
So how do we in destination countries help to change the mindset of the migrant that's in our countries working? How do we encourage savings? How do we change the way, the paradigm of people thinking? And how do we, in sending countries, educate the families back home how to use the remittances that are coming back and not to just spend it all. When the migrant comes home, normally they find that all the money they've sent home has gone. There's nothing. The family is still in the same position. So how are we as Good Shepherd forming a community of practice for people who are involved in migration work to talk to each other and say, these are the experiences I'm experiencing in my program in the destination country. What is it like in your program in the village where they come from? Understand each other, and then we form interventions that cuts across different countries. We must be able as Good Shepherd to elevate ourselves to that level so that when we become effective on the ground, whether it's sending country or receiving country, then we will have things to report at the UN level. And we will have good practices to say, this is how we are looking at things from the Good Shepherd perspective, because we are a global organization. And Marie Jean was right just now. She said, we only look after our own program. It's time to open up and to widen our perspective. And the time is now, and presented by COVID-19. Because we're all at home, we have an opportunity now to have sessions like this. What do we do after this? Because the lockdown has forced us to open up our minds. When the opening of the lockdown happens, do we go back to closing our minds? Because we become busy again. Because migration happens in our minds also. Yeah? Okay, I'm going to put up the poll for people to respond in the next 5 minutes as to how this session has been for you. So you will see the poll up, please respond. Any reactions? Any reaction from Winifred? Let's hear from Winifred. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, no.
Yes.
listen, Teresa, thank you very much. I think you did a marvelous job moving from what was presented in terms of the global perspective at the last day to actually bringing it down to in-country experience and across Asia experience, and looking at it in terms of sending and receiving countries and the differences that can happen there. I think it was marvelous. I think people have still a lot to work on to break down in terms of the presentation and how it might impact them. I know in my small group there was a discussion which I think was very interesting, that it had to do with really girls being trafficked and women being trafficked into the entertainment industry, and then beyond even to Kenya. That was one part of it. And then the other part had to do with the whole idea of how do we educate the duty bearers, and had I any experience on how that's done. And I had to think here in New York in terms of lawyers who are parts of NGOs who would undertake to have capacity building for the judges and people in the judicial system and for prosecutors to sensitize them to the issue of what I'm thinking of is human trafficking. But I think we have the same kind of job to do in terms of how do we build the capacity of our government officials at local government, at the wherever the middle government is. Many of us are not at the capital, and some of us are maybe, to get them to look at migration in terms of what you have presented this evening. Like, why are all our people leaving? What can we do to help people to stay at home, to build their own lives at home, while recognizing that there is the right to safe, orderly and regular migration for all people. People can travel, can cross borders, although maybe COVID might say that we won't be crossing them in the same way anymore. Who knows? So we might have to actually be pushed to look at how do we redesign our economies at home such that the economy is inclusive of and including all people, as you said, the participation of the people in the development of the country, in the building the economy, not for profit, but to address the needs of all. So there's some of the points that I just share with you this evening. So I think you did great. Thank you.
Thank you, Winifred. I just want to expand a little bit more on this capacity development of duty bearers, and perhaps share with you an example that's very close to heart. Just to share with you, in Malaysia, we are a destination country for migrants. And our human trafficking, our record in human trafficking is really atrocious. We've gone from level 2, tier 2 to tier 2 watch list to tier 3 to being on the verge of economic sanction. So we asked ourselves as Good Shepherd, how do we engage the government? Okay, and we started very, very simply by doing one project in the government shelter. One mission partner, one sister would travel every week from a particular place to go to a government shelter to do counseling. We did that for 2 years whilst developing the relationship with the government officers. That was, I think, could be maybe 6 or 7 years ago. We started that. Today, we are in the table together with government officers talking about how to change the laws in the country with regard to human trafficking. I have facilitated sessions for government officers to look at indicators of human trafficking. This is really, really something that we never thought we would be doing when the first sister said, I will take the train 2 hours every 1 day a week to go to this government shelter. But to get to this point, it is important to look at your own system within Good Shepherd. What is your structures like to enable long-term working solutions? If you change the sister or the person every 2 years, this will not happen. Because the same person was in leadership all through this time, we were able to track the progress. And we were able to say, step by step, what do we do? This cannot happen if we keep changing people leading programs, because the new person will come in and it will start all over again.
Yeah.
You look at Winifred has been in her position for 12 years and 5 months already. That's how we see the progress. And that's how we see change happening. So I go back to my diagram of the mission partner as the change agent and Good Shepherd as the change vehicle. Ask yourself, as the change vehicle, what are your structures that will enable long-term solution and long-term interventions? We need to change the way we are working. And we have a person from the Life Seekers group here with us in this screen. The Life Seekers, you know, that group that will make organization change. So we need to ask ourselves what changes need to happen. I want to encourage you at this last minute to please switch on your videos again. We will do a screenshot and put on your best smile so that, you know, we do documentation as well besides the video that's recording. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Nice.